Now in Elden Ring Nightreign there are a whole bunch of weapons that you can get hold of within your expeditions, but none are more sought after or more powerful than the legendary ones you can pick up along the way. These things are really rare and most times you're going to obtain them from beating the toughest enemies. If you don't know exactly what they do, you may overlook them or exactly what they'll bring to your expedition. I'm going to be going over my top 10 picks for the most powerful and best legendary weapons in the game and ones that you should definitely be looking out for. So coming in at 10th place, the first one we're going to be going over is going to be the Carian Regal Scepter. This thing scales entirely in intelligence, going all the way to S, and is a magic user's dream. Obviously this would work perfectly with Recluse, but in a clutch situation it can also be chucked onto a Duchess. But the main reason you're probably going to be using this is going to be for Renala's Full Moon. This thing is a really high damage magic spell, sending a floating orb of doom towards your enemies, and whenever it does manage to reach them, it's going to burst on impact and do a huge amount of damage, as well as lowering their magic damage negation. Its passive is going to be the Full Moon, and this dispels sorceries and incantations, as well as kind of chucking out glint blades in its return as retaliation. I have personally never seen this happen. There's not a whole bunch of times this is going to come into effect, so the main reason you'll be using this weapon will be for the Renala's Full Moon. Honestly, this thing is an absolute monster. It's a lot of fun to use and it does some really high damage, but the main thing I would say is it does take a little bit of a while to use, so you do want to make sure you're not being targeted by the boss when you're using it. But as long as you've got on certain classes such as your Recluse and you're playing a little bit further away, hopefully whenever you're not being attacked by an enemy, this can do some significant damage, and as well as that, bring down the enemy's magic negation, allowing you to switch off, use other moves if you need to, or of course do even more damage with this same skill. Over to our 9th slot, and for this one, another magic weapon, and this time we've got the Winged Greathorn. This being a greatsword, it scales mainly its strength in B, but also has a little bit of dexterity as well as intelligence as well, going all the way to C. For that reason, this sword can actually be used on quite a few different classes, not just your big boys focusing on strength, but I'd say overall it's probably most suited to Raider, Wilder and also Duchess, who really takes advantage of this when you do get hold of it. Its skill moveset is going to be your Moonlight Greatsword, which is going to allow you to coat your blade in kind of magic or a Moonlight Aura, and from there you're going to get a slightly enhanced attack, but the main reason you're probably going to be using this is going to be for its ranged charge attacks. Its passive is going to be Power of Dark Moon. Very similar to our last one, it's going to lower the enemy's magic damage negation, so again, really fits those magic playstyle builds. After using this quite a few times within my expeditions, at certain times I've found overall it was probably actually best suited to actually Duchess, which you wouldn't think so, because it allows you to get off a significant amount of damage at range, and also really suits her playstyle, where she scales so well into that intelligence scaling. Of course, you can go in, do your light attacks, do things such as that if you want to get in and get out, but more so it's going to be for a range damage, and of course lowering their magic negation on those enemies as well. Setting you up perfect if you've managed to grab hold of something else such as a staff, in order to hopefully perform a really powerful move afterwards. I found in my expeditions this has worked out amazing, sometimes sets you up really well, especially if you're able to get a whole bunch of FP going, and for that reason this is one that's well worth picking up, especially on the classes mentioned earlier. Over to number 8, and I wanted to put this a little bit higher, but it ended up at 8. One of my personal favourites, the Starscourge Greatsword. This thing is an absolute monster in certain hands, and the Colossal Sword is aimed more towards your strength characters, such as your Wilder and Raider, but can be effective on Guardian as well. Now this sword comes with a skill move, Starcaller's Cry, which is really good for kind of collecting enemies together and doing a bit of damage that way. But the main reason I'd say you'll be using this is going to be for how effective it is, for its heavy attacks, the fact that you can power stance it very easy because you get 2 swords straight off the bat and you're doing some big damage with your jumping attacks or just heavier than other attacks in general. But the other reason this one's so good is going to be its passive power, and that's going to be your Starscourge. Basically, whenever you first start off a combo, now it's going to dish out a massive amount of damage, do a whole bunch of gravity effect as well, and it's absolutely perfect to dish out some kind of light attack combos, or as I found, even better than that, you're going to want to completely expend all of your stamina when you're fighting bosses or those toughest enemies, because then whenever it's that first attack, which will pretty much be every single time, you're going to get that big gravity hit over and over again. This can work out insanely powerful. The only thing I would say is with this weapon, sometimes it's a little bit on the slow side, or because of the range of it, it can be a bit hard to get off on some of those tricky or fast boss encounters. Over to number 7, and anyone who's played the base game of Elden Ring will have known about this one, because as soon as you get your hands on it, it is just such a good weapon, and that's going to be the Hand of Malenia. This one is an absolute beast, great damage, speed, it's got bleed effect going on. Obviously, because of its attributes, this one's going to be most suited towards some of your classes, such as the faster style ones, such as your Executor or Duchess, but as well as that, you may also want to pick it up on your Iron Eye if you're playing as one and you haven't got any of those two in your team. The main reason for this being so good is going to be its actual skill move, which is going to be the Waterfowl Dance. This does a high amount of burst damage, it's really cool to watch it go off, and you're going to want to press it twice so that you get the follow-up attacks, dishing out even more damage in the process. Working absolutely hand in hand with this, its passive power of the Undefeated means that you're able to regain a lot of your health back whenever you're taking damage, because it's going to work exactly the same as your kind of relics that you can pick up that has this already on them at standard, where your post-attack damage recoups your health back nice and fast. When you're dishing out a lot of damage, as long as you've got a significant health bar, this can be kind of crazy on certain enemies and bosses, but don't get too overconfident because some bosses hit so hard or so fast that sometimes this won't completely take effect. All in all though, still an absolute blast and one of the best weapons to get hold of in the game, and because it's a bleed weapon, works really well even if you're not pulling off any of its skill move. Coming in at number 6, and a weapon I feel like a lot of people are kind of not giving enough credit for just how good this one is, and that's going to be the Sword of Night and Flame. This weapon is very well rounded, so scanning to see in pretty much everything except for Faith means it can be equipped on almost all classes, but probably overall it's best suited to the playstyles of Duchess, Executor and Wilder. Now its Night and Flame stance is great for anyone who wants to take advantage of close range combat, and a lot of things in the game are actually quite susceptible for fire, so that works out absolutely perfect. If however you've got something that isn't great for a flame build, don't forget you can always back off and take advantage of its ranged magic stance, kind of firing off lasers and doing a whole bunch of damage that way. Its passive power of Night and Flame means that when you activate a skill, it's going to add extra fire or magic attack power to your weapon depending on which stance you've gone with, and overall this is just a really nice versatile weapon that, like I said earlier, works on a lot of characters and actually does a decent amount of damage. All in all, I found this to be a very solid legendary whenever I used it, and after you get used to it, it's easy to use, well-rounded combat, can help you to take down the smaller enemies very fast, but also dish out a nice amount of damage to those tougher bosses. Remember, switching your stances is always going to help if you're facing against something that's susceptible to that damage type. However, at the moment, not much is susceptible to magic unfortunately, but it does still do a nice amount of damage from range, and of course gives you a whole bunch more survivability because you don't have to be up close and personal in order to still dish out a whole bunch of damage. Then for our 5th spot, we have an absolute powerhouse, and that's going to be Mohgwyns' Sacred Spear. Another great bleed weapon, and this one works on a lot of classes, but it's probably best suited to Wilder, Executor and Guardian. Now the skill move that it has is called Bloodboon Ritual, and it's an absolutely devastating skill that's going to allow you to raise your spear above your head, doing high damage, but ultimately if you can, you'll want to do it 3 times over, as the third one seems to do the most damage by a long way. As well as this though, it's also going to coat your weapon in blood flame, making it even more powerful, which is also good because it costs a lot of FP to do your skill moves in this game, so at least this way, even if you can only pull off 1 or 2, it's still going to give you a whole bunch of uptime on that coating, allowing you to do more damage that way. As well as this though, it's also got the power of Bloodlord, which I believe gives around about 30% extra damage to enemies whenever blood loss is in the vicinity, so it works hand in hand with the weapon, making this easily one of the strongest weapons in the game to dish out a whole bunch of damage nice and fast. The only downside with this, in order to manage to pull off that move, you do have to stand still, so you may have to pick a window of opportunity, but as long as you can pull it off, you're going to do some ridiculous damage, and it'll be a lot of fun to watch in the process. This is also, I found, one of the best weapons you can actually equip for the Guardian. Overall, it's just a really powerful weapon to have hold of, and one that you can't really go wrong with having in your expeditions. Now next up, as a raider main, I have to say this is one of my favourite weapons to use in the game, and that's the Winged Greathorn. With a scaling of S in strength, this one is definitely by far best on a raider or wilder, and even without using anything, this does a lot of damage as standard. However, when you take into account its skill move, which is going to be Soul Stifler, the weapon itself becomes really powerful on your own, but also more powerful in a group. When you use this, it's going to reduce the damage negation of all close by enemies by around about 15%, allowing you to all hit like an absolute truck. But on top of this, it gets even better with this weapon, because its passive Power of the Ancestral Spirit means whenever you're attacking an enemy with this weapon, after a short while, it's going to get another debuff that stacks on top of the previous one, meaning the enemy takes an extra 10% damage on top of that as well. All in all, this means you and your group will deal a massive amount of damage when you have got double debuff going on, because you'll be able to hit the enemies around about 25% extra harder. On its own, still a great weapon, I find it one of my favourite ones in the game, but in a group setting, this one is just ridiculously strong, especially if other players in your group have got any kind of legendaries or strong damage types going on as well, and because of this, I'd say it's well earned its 4th spot, as personally I think it's currently the best co-op weapon you can have in any team in the game. For that reason, chuck this on, dish out a whole bunch of damage and debuffs, and watch your group smash bosses very fast and easily. For our 3rd place, we have Malikeths' Black Blade. Another fantastic colossal weapon, and this one dishes out incredible damage, best suited to your raiders and wilders, but I believe you probably could use this with a guardian as well, because its main reason is going to be that you want to be pulling off its skill move that works very similar to the Black Knife. Its skill move is called Destined Death, and it just hits incredibly hard, because not only does it do a considerable amount of damage, it also lowers the enemy's max HP. Its passive power is a little bit similar. Destined Death also does a bit of extra damage whenever you're launching standard attacks. Overall, it's not quite as strong as a skill move, which I would class as almost borderline broken, especially if you're stacking up a lot of damage on your character with Evergels and such. Now, like I said, this is a colossal weapon, so as standard it's going to do a nice high amount of damage, but adding on top of that its passive and its skill move, Destined Death, can see you taking out enemies and bosses before they've even known what hits them. You're going to want to make sure you use this move as much as possible in order to continually rack up a lot of damage, and for that reason it will cost a lot of FP shards, but honestly it's definitely one move that you're going to want to have them on to waste. For that reason this is in my third spot, and I believe it's one of the very most powerful weapons currently in the game. Jumping into our second spot, and no doubt some people will probably have this as their first, as currently it's the highest damage weapon in the game, and that's going to be the Marais Executioner Sword. This sword should be picked up no matter what class you're using because of the insane buff it's going to give you, allowing you to dish out an incredible amount of damage no matter who you are or what you're using. Now the skill move that this sword comes with is going to be, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Echod's Dancing Blade, and anyone who's fought the Barbarian Hunter will no doubt have this rummaging around somewhere in their nightmares, as it's going to be the same move when he throws out his sword in that kind of swirling attack in a straight line that does a whole bunch of ridiculous damage to you. This on its own does amazing damage, but the most broken thing about this weapon is going to be the power on it, and that's the power of the House Marais. Now, whenever you actually defeat an enemy, the damage you do will go up, and every single time you're taking one down, I believe it goes up by just under 1%. I think it's around about 0.8% extra attack power added onto your build. If you manage to pick this up early, you're going to want to beeline to just a whole bunch of groups, take down a whole bunch of enemies, camps, wherever there's going to be people around for you to destroy, you're going to want to beeline over to them, defeat as much as possible, as this is going to make your damage absolutely jump through the roof. One thing you will want to do though, as with a lot of these weapons, make sure you have some FP shards about yourself so that you can use the skill move on it, because you're definitely going to want to fully utilise that. But remember, you don't have to, so even if you want to use this in your other hand, make sure it's equipped, because like I said earlier, you can actually use this on any class. For that reason, this weapon is just an insane powerhouse to have, and unfortunately I can't show you any proper footage, because whenever I pick this up, it always tends to be at the end of an expedition. But personally, there's nothing better than seeing this picked up by someone such as an Iron Eye or anyone that does high skill damage, and watching them as they burn through bosses, sometimes hitting them for up to kind of half of their health bar. Lastly, for my top spot, coming in at number 1, my absolute favourite, and personally what I would consider the most overpowered weapon in the game by quite some margin, and that has to be the Grafted Greatsword. This weapon, again, is one that any class should be picking up, because the main thing is you want to make sure you get the buffs from it, and very similar in vein to the last weapon, you're going to be taking down a whole bunch of enemies in order to make yourself more powerful. However, with this one it's slightly different. Like I said, I believe this one's stronger overall. For a skill power, you're going to have Over Vengeance. This one's great as it's going to raise your stats as well as give you a whole bunch of poise, so it's really nice, especially for people this is intended for most of all, probably that of the likes of Raider and such. But again, the main reason you're going to be wielding this weapon is going to be for its passive power, the Power of Vengeance. This means whenever you or your team is taking down enemies within your vicinity, whatever's defeated is going to go towards actually boosting up your overall stats. This works out ridiculously high. I believe it's around about 0.4 or even 0.5 increase to your overall stats whenever a single enemy is taken down, and like I said, it also works whenever your team around you is taking them down as well. This can lead to some absolutely game breaking expedition runs, especially if you have a night 1 boss that can actually dish out a whole bunch of continuous enemies such as the Duke's Dear Freya, and personally I've never had more of a more fun run than when I've been wielding this and everything has gone completely right. All you're going to do is keep taking out as many enemies as possible, run through your expedition, build up so much damage and health as well as FP and stamina bar that you can just continuously do whatever you want to do, and then you can head off to the toughest bosses, take them down in a few swings, and build up the powers and passives ridiculously fast. When you've got this weapon, you'll want to be taking out as much as possible, as fast as possible, in order to get yourself a whole bunch of health and damage very quickly. On an average run with this, I've seen it hit around about 4k health as well as over 2k damage, but if, like myself, you manage to get a perfected run, like you'll see in the one in the background, I managed to hit, by the end of the expedition, around about 20,000 health overall, as well as just over 6,000 attack power for my weapon. This means you're able to tackle everything without any issues whatsoever, and even when you're getting hit or taking some of the big damage that should usually put you to one shot, you don't even notice your health going down. Overall, just a ridiculously broken weapon, but one that's so much fun. I really hope they keep it in the game. But one that's so much fun, I really hope they keep it in the game, because with all of these legendaries, it's very hard to get hold of them, so it's good to put a smile on your face when something like this does drop. Overall though, these are my top picks. They're the best legendary weapons I think for Nightreign. If there's anything you'd put in a different spot, or you think there's anything I've missed off, I'd love to hear from you. As always, there'll be a whole bunch more content away from me. For now, take care. I'll see you on the next day.